Okay, we started the recording. Welcome, everyone. So you'll see that we're going to cover topics 10 and 11. And I put a piece in there about topic number 9 because what that's all about is that strategic planning is all about competitive advantage, right? And I keep on talking about how management principles and theories are going to change to adjust to new technologies like disruptive technologies and AI and robotics. But the only thing consistent is change. But the other thing that's going to be consistent, regardless of all these changes, is the need for competitive advantage. And that's why the remainder of the course here is really all steeped in competitive advantage. So all the tools and techniques that are related to the management principles and the theories, most of them are all about competitive advantage. So that's what you're going to see in this presentation, right? And I keep on reminding you too is that strategic planning or planning for business at all, is just about as much as what you're not going to do as what you are going to do. And it comes back to economics, right? You have scarce resources. And if you have scarce resources, then you have to make the best choices possible. And in order to do that, then there's things that you have to make trade-offs. You have to decide that you're not going to do certain things, and you're going to thrive, and you're going to build your competitive advantage through core competencies based on what you can do with the best use of your resources and what will work for you in the marketplace. So it's really important that even the organization knows what you're not going to do, because if they know what you're not going to do, then the decisions will be a lot more aligned. So that's the key message here as we go through. And hi, Kate. Nice to see you on as well. So we'll go forward here. Okay, so the competitive advantage model is a combination of people, process, and technology. And the thing is, we're going to talk about VRIO, that framework in the next few slides, and that's all about maintaining and managing your what they call sustainable competitive advantage. And when it comes to people, process, and technology, well, your competitors can hire people from your organization and beat you at your game. Your competitors can actually buy the same technology that you're using to be able to be as competitive or more competitive, or they can adjust their processes the best that they can. But here's where the people, process, technology comes together. It's the synergies through the culture in this middle here that gives you competitive advantage. And that's hard to emulate, right? That's hard to copy. And so that's the key message in the VRIO platform that I'm going to be talking about today, right? So if you exclude people, well, then you alienate everybody, and you have underutilized technology. They'll work to rule or whatever. If you don't work at the process, well, then you won't have the level of automation, quality, and efficiency that brings about, and that will land up in confusion. And then if you don't have the technology, well, then you'll never have that operational efficiency, and people will always be frustrated because they'll be limited in resources to be able to compete in their marketplace. So that's the model around a competitive advantage. And then this is a little bit of the work that I've been doing over the years. And you go through all this planning process from vision, mission, goals, objectives, all the way through to execution. But the key pieces around this are the value proposition, and we're going to talk about the value proposition a little bit. The strategy is that that's a form follows function. You really need to understand how and why and in what manner you're doing things to be able to set that up. And then the business model. And I'll tell you, I've done a lot of business plans for especially small and medium-sized businesses. And I'd say only 10% of the work that I did over, say, the last 20 years, the owners actually understood the power of a business model. And the thing is, it's not rocket science. It can be done. And I'm going to talk to you about Alexander Osterwalder's model, and he's probably one of the leaders in this business model canvas that he puts out. And I've used this to help small businesses, and it's amazing, what I saw, what kind of results came out of them, just really understanding what their business model was, and look at that on how they can improve and their business and maintain competitive advantage. So that's really key. So if your strategy is right and your business model then builds competitive advantage, then it's all about execution then of the value proposition itself. And I think I've mentioned this before, but the actual value proposition, that's what are you offering of value to the customer, right? Knowing what keeps them awake at night, you have that secret sauce to be able to create an offering that will help them improve their lives, their business, their revenues, and everything else. But that value proposition is the seed of strategy. Right there and then, when you start creating that value proposition, and there's a group or consultants called Michael Tracy and Fred Wiersma, they talk about, if you take a look at you look at the product leadership and what you need to do in that value proposition to give you product leadership, or operational excellence. And one of the operational excellence really is Hewlett Packard, right? That's they're key on that piece because they're driven, to Six Sigma or the total quality management or customer intimacy. At one time, WestJet Airlines was kind of one of the better organizations in Canada that really understood how to keep customers happy. And what Tracy and Wiersman say that if you try to do all three, you're going to blow your brains out. So what you do is you focus on one, and then you make sure on those other two areas that you're at the level of competition in terms of performance and promotion and production of what you're doing. All right. So right then and there, by picking one of those key things, what are you doing is you're really seeding the strategy for building what that strategy should look like. And then through your business model, what kind of organizational capacity that you need to be able to be competitive. So that's what this is all about. So here's this guy right here, right? He's Alex Osterwalder, and he designed this business model canvas. But what I'm trying to make out of this illustration for you is here's all the things that we're going to be talking about in topics 10 and 11. The value chain, VRIO, the SIPOC, SCM, total quality management. This is SCM is supply chain management. The value chain itself. SIPOC is about understanding suppliers. VRO is about understanding how you maintain competitive advantage. And then we're going to talk about the ideal customer, and from the ideal customer, we're going to talk about a buyer persona. And you can see that all these pieces that we're working with are all tools and techniques that came out of management principles, that came out of theories, over the scope of the timeline that we're going through. All right. And so that's what these are. I'm checking off all the boxes here for this business model canvas, and I can't say enough about it. So having said that, I put a link in here. This is only a 6-minute video of Alexander talks about this business model canvas that he's built, and it's worth your time to kind of go through there and really understanding that. And especially you, I think, Grant, you're thinking about doing a lot more on your own business. That's where the business model is so crucial. And then it's a tool to be able to align the people that work for you, to train them with, so they understand what's important. Where's your money coming from? Where are your partners? Where are your raw materials coming from? How do you make your money? What are your costs? All those things go into the business model, which make it, and you can do this on one page almost, to be able to really represent what your business should be on in terms of a business model. All right, so let's get into how to manage products. But again, you're managing products based on the capacity, the type and amount of capacity your organization has, and that's seeped into your business model, the foundational part, to be able to make all this work. Okay, this is just an advertisement right now, but if you want to know about more about generative AI fundamentals, you can go to this site and actually sign up, and you can do some training here. So and it's free training. So it might help you as you're going forward, going through. So talk about the deliverables. So guess what? Hey, no Pearson surveys to complete. For topic 10, there's no additional e-text Robin PowerPoint presentations to review. So mainly this is all kind of what's in this presentation. And again, I'm going to ask you to, be mindful of the golden keys and the yellow highlighting and the bold statements, and then the kind of hints that I give you along the way, what's going to be on test 3. And again, just to kind of thanks Grant for bringing this up, let you know that test 1 and test 2, the average of the class is fairly high. People on the for the most part have done really well, and there's no failures to date as well. So that's going well, and I'm pretty happy about that. So congratulations on that piece. All right, so let's talk about test number 3. So again, it's going to be, it's going to be online. It's going to be off campus, but it's only one scheduled day and time. That's it. There's no window to be able to do it. It starts June the 19th at 7 p.m. It'll be open in a 3-hour window. It lasts about 80 minutes to go through. And oh, by the way, when you start, the test itself will self-close after 80 minutes. And again, 50 multiple choice and true and false questions, predominantly multiple choice questions that are on there. And again, you need to use your lockdown browser, and webcam will be required for this test. So just so you know that it's going to go through. So here again, it's this part of this illustration that I've created. Your practice tests for test 3 are in topic 12. And again, these commentary presentations are the most important part. And the thing is that the Robbins chapters are so important to be able to give you the flesh and around those bones of the things that I'm providing in these commentary presentations. And you can see there's really only 4 chapters of presentations to go through for Robbins. There's none for topic 10. And you'll see for topic 11, chapter 13 and chapter 3. And again, these presentations are available in the weekly commentary folder, on the Blackboard navigational panel. All right. And again, you're gonna access this test in topic 13. All right. And then here's what it is, and it's showing you that test is going to cover topics 9, 10, 11, and 12. And again, starts at 7 p.m. And again, if you have a Chromebook, here's some extra stuff about looking at that. The lockdown browser programming is not as I guess consistent to be able to deal with Chromebooks. So make sure that if you do use a Chromebook, check with the library. Is probably the best place, and they'll help you make sure that you're all good for the lockdown browser and your web things. All right. So one of the things that we're going to talk about in topic 10 is the buyer persona, and I'm going to make a distinction too between ideal customer and buyer persona. All right, as I go through, but really what we're asking for in participation topic 10A is you to kind of look at one particular ideal client, which is the segment of that client, and translate that into the buyer persona that's in that ideal client for Tim Hortons. Right? So just one of them. That's all you have to do, because Tim Hortons has many customer segments. So you might pick college students, or you might pick the working the traveling working person that leaves in the morning, or those kind of things. And I've given you links. Use the templates, please. All right. Use the templates. And again, this is going to be reflected in a question that will be in assignment number 4. So the better that you do this, and the more that you use the template, then you'll be able to transform that template to manage something for the Amazon assignment. Okay, so that's where that's going. And then you could see right here in this presentation, this is the picture. So if you clicked on this link on the picture, it's not going to work. So, those active links are really in Blackboard in topic 10. Sometimes I actually additionally put the link on in the presentation, but if I tried to click on this link right now, it wouldn't work. All right. So here's just an example. Well, what is a buyer persona? I did a little work for an HVAC company, so heating and ventilating, air conditioning company in Red Deer, and we looked at in that footprint, what would the typical buyer look like? So we went from ideal customer, which is a sort of a demographic segment of about 30 years old to 50 years old. But inside that, what would a customer look like, in terms of an ideal customer buying persona, so that you would know how to connect with that person and have that dialogue, so they really say, oh yeah, I know this company, they know what to do for me. And that's the power, is to be able to make that connection with that customer. And so you're going to take a look at, well, what are their main demographic profiles? And what identifies, that Sarah Thompson, in terms of, does she participate in online groups or whatever? And we're going to talk about the customer journey. And that's near the end of this presentation. And that's where you take a look at the buying process, from first just being introduced to the product to actually, buying the product and then working with it. And the big message on that customer journey is that you need to go where the customer is. And that's why it's so important. If you know that that Sarah Thompson's on Instagram, well, guess what? You're going to advertise there, and you're going to have interactive pieces on Instagram to be able to engage that particular buyer persona, right? And then understanding what their goals and motivations are, and really what they're looking for. What's a gain point for them? So a gain point is, wow, this is something special, that not only does my heating and ventilating system is the best, but I have 24-hour coverage. That's a gain point. All right, I can call 3 o'clock in the morning, and guess what? Somebody's going to service that unit, so I don't have to worry about 30 below in the middle of the night. All right, and then what are the main pains? And that's key. And then what are their core values, so that you can resonate with them? And then what are their motivations? And when I talk about psychographic motivation, psychographic is, it's beyond demographic. Demographic is just statistically age and income and that, but psychographics are, what kind of person are they? Are they an outdoor person? Are they, do they have are they intellectual? Are they, just, hard workers? Those kind of things. And then the buying context and relationship. So those are the things that, I'm gonna get you to do in 10A, in that participation topic, but only for Tim Hortons, and one small ideal client segment, and translate that into naming that person. So it might be Joe 4x4, all right, and you might then start looking at, well, what makes Joe 4x4 tick, right? So that's all about. So here's another one that I've done, and I've done this. This was for a rural museum, basically called the I think it was the North Simcoe Art Barn, all right, and we came up with an ideal customer by a persona called Amy Artsy, and we characterize that. So what I want you to do is that inside of that participation activity, there's a link to this PowerPoint template, and I want you to use slide 5 and 6 of that PowerPoint template to reconstitute this into a buyer persona that you come up with for Tim Hortons, right? So again, I'm asking you to keep to the templates. When I'm marking all these things, it makes it so easy for me to be able to help you, help me help you, and give you a good mark, because I can see right away, that you've complied to the requirements, and you're hitting all the points that I'm looking for. All right, so that's what that's all about. So the slide 5 is a template for part 1, and that's this one. And then part 2, whoops, yeah, and part 2 looks like this. So you're really kind of filling out, the attributes about what are their gain points, what are their pain points, what are their core values, what are their psychographics, and those kind of things. And oh, by the way, you know, use AI to be able to do that. Go into Copilot or Chat or Claude or whatever, ChatGPT, and give the more information that you give them about what you're looking for, the more detail you give them around that ideal customer for for Tim Hortons and what you're giving them a sense of maybe you even can say, well, I'm looking for somebody like a student, ideal customer buyer persona. You lay this out for me, and you'll be surprised what comes out of it. Matter of fact, I used to do this by, you know, uh, you know, uh, I didn't have AI way back when, all right? So I would sit down like I sat down with the Art Barn with all their employees, and it took us half a day to do Amy Artsy, right? So I ended up doing one for my daughter who has she's a physio and she has a physio business, and I did an ideal customer for her in 10 minutes. All right. And it was surprising how bang on that it was. So that AI is really powerful when it comes to doing these kind of things. Okay. So here's a little bit about, this is a really good video that you could go into, and it really talks to you mainly about the ideal customer profile that you convert into a buyer persona, right? It's 15 minutes, and it'll really give you a good idea of what you can do to be able to do this. And again, if you're going into your own business, this is so worthwhile, to do this exercise. And you may be in your own business maybe 3 years from now and say, hey, you know what? We did this ideal customer buyer persona thing, and keep this presentation, and so you can go through and do that. Okay, so there's Amy Artsy. We had a lot of fun doing this, by the way. And it really kind of gelled the workforce. It's amazing how excited they got once they realized that, hey, we can relate, to one of their key customers, right? So that's really key. And then how does this all fit in? Well, it fits into this value proposition that I talked about. What is that offering that's going to be, unique to you in the marketplace? And again, Alex Osterwalder, he created this value proposition canvas. And here's where those gains come in. Here's where those pains come in. And then what customer jobs is a customer job is basically, what does that customer have to do to find you? That's a job in itself. What does that customer do with the product or service that you provide? What does that customer what do they have to go through to be successful in this? And those particular jobs then really make it relevant to that buyer persona. And then what do you do? Once you do the customer side of the buyer persona, then all of a sudden now you can go through and look at the types of product services you provide and how they create gains for Amy Artsy. How do they create pain relievers for Amy Artsy? And oh, by the way, if you read Blue Ocean Strategy, it'll really give you a good sense of how they kind of looked into how they could provide a better offering based on what the competition is doing. And again, they'll tell just like in strategic planning, they'll basically it will drop out what you shouldn't do and what you should do to be able to really bring these people into your fold in terms of your business fold. So there's a lot there. So again, let's just start now with some of the tools. All right. So one of them is VRIO analysis. And what does that stand for? Well, here they are. Okay. So V stands for value. R stands for rarity. I sounds for imitability, which means can your competition duplicate what you're doing? All right. And the less capable they are to duplicate, the longer you're going to have some edge on the market in terms of competitive advantage. And then the organization. So again, it gets back to, even in the balanced scorecard, remember we talked about, the fourth area, which is, basically, knowledge and pieces. And we talked about it really is organizational capacity. So that's where, you can even bring the balanced scorecard into, you're looking at the type of KPIs that you need to be able to maintain that competitive advantage from an organizational capacity perspective, right? So again, what do you do then? It's just a quick process. Is that all right? So is this offering, is it valuable, right? Well, if it's really valuable, well then, yeah, that this is something that people are going to be looking for. But is it rare, right? And rare is something, is it unique kind of thing. So that if it's rare or unique, well, then that's even going to really give you a lift in the marketplace, right? Because people say, well, we're going to go to ABC coffee shop because they've got the absolute best flavors in coffee that you can imagine, right? So that's rare. But is it imitable or inimitable? Can you duplicate it? All right. And so you don't see Tim Hortons trying to duplicate Starbucks coffee, right? So that's what keeps Starbucks, that where people will pay, $5 plus a cup of coffee, because there's certain things that Second Cup or Tim Hortons or can't, or Coffee Time, basically they can't match, right? So that gives Starbucks a leg up in terms of competitive advantage. And then is the organizational at its fullest to be able to manage that competitive advantage, right? So that's what a VRIO analysis looks like. And you can simplify this, and if you do, it'll mean nothing. So the more that you put into the critical thinking around that, the more valuable this analysis comes into. And we talk about the term sustainable competitive advantage. In my mind, that's an oxymoron. There's no such thing as sustainable competitive advantage, because as soon as you're successful at something and you're different and you're doing better, guess what? The competition is right after you. So you always got to manage, to maintain that edge, to stay, competitive. And we're going to talk about that a little bit as well. Okay, so here's participation topic 10B. All right. And what I want you to do is, we're going to simplify this. So what I'm looking for is 3 separate examples under the categories that I'm giving you. All right. So one Tim Hortons example on human capital. Well, it could be the up and coming employee training that they provide that nobody else can do right now, right? To give them some competitive advantage, or their experience around hospitality or whatever. And then organizational capacity. Well, do they have any patents? Do they have any key processes that sharpen their offering and lower the response time, or those kind of things. And then one example of physical capital. Well, they're pervasive, right? One of the physical capitalists, is that they're on every street corner in every major city, and so they've got presence, and they've got like exposure. Everybody knows what Tim Hortons is all about, and then even so we'll leave it at that. So I want you to do one example of each one of these firm resources of human capital, organizational capital, or physical capital, and then take each example through. Well, is it really valuable? Rate that. Is it rare? Can it be imitated? And if it can't, the least amount of imitation, the stronger it is in a competitive advantage. Is the organizational capacity there to be able to support that piece? And again, learning and growth in the balanced scorecard piece really is a view of organizational capacity. So keep that in mind too, is that balanced scorecard piece of having the metrics to be able to go through and work that. Okay, just another thing, the reminder, the number 4 assignment, the group assignment, it's due on June the 16th. And then you're going to do a team member review of the work that you did, with the participation activities and the assignments. And that's an individual submission that's due June the 16th as well. All right. Again, the active assignment instruction links, you can't hit this link and get anything. You got to go to Blackboard topic 10 and on those posts, and you'll be able to see where that is. So I can't say enough about competitive advantage. And there's a little YouTube video here, and I think it's about 13 minutes, but it's worth the pain. It's worth the pain to be able to really understand what competitive advantage is all about, because it has all kinds of tentacles, right? It really kind of maps where that VRIO is coming from, having proprietary technologies, its brand image. I mean, it's no secret that Tim Hortons has such a great Canadian brand image, even though it's an American company and people don't realize that. How it offers unique services, the high skilled workforce, because having high skilled workforce is a core competency that translates into competitive advantage. Gaining exclusive access to new technologies and exclusivity. So even, at one point in time, I owned a security company with a partner in Calgary. Well, our territory was exclusive. So no one from that company could come in and sell their security system. We still had to deal against, the other competitors, but we did have some exclusivity. And sometimes you can, especially if you're first into the market and there's this new fangled product that's going to be a disruptive technology, and you can say, oh, well, okay, hang on, you're not in North America yet. Okay, if you give us exclusive territory for Alberta, then we'll sign up and we'll be one of your subsidiaries or whatever. Right, so that's what that's all about. So I'd strongly recommend that you look at this video, and guess what? It's only 7 minutes, all right? So that might be good. But what are you looking at in terms of competitive advantage? Well, your unique value proposition, your resource capabilities, leveraging innovation, looking at analyzing and where the customer preferences. And we've looked at these pieces. So understanding your unique value proposition. Well, here's Alexander Osterwalder's template. Leveraging innovation. Well, there's creativity and innovation type things. Design thinking. We're going to talk about that. Analyzing the market. Well, there's pestle analysis. Competitive analysis. Well, there's the 5 forces analysis by Michael Porter. Emphasizing customer experience. Well, I spent a lot of time when I was at TELUS when we looked at the service delivery process, and we definitely used the TQM, voice of the customer. We used all the best practices that had to offer to be able to go and analyze what customers really wanted, and we kind of mapped that against what the inside group thought the customers wanted. And guess what? It wasn't always the same thing. And that really kind of gave us a great realization of what that gap was, and people understood what they had to do to close that gap, when we finished all those analyses. Okay, so how does this all fit? So I wanted to show you, I talk about cascading all the time, and that's where, you're at a top level, and then whatever gets put together in terms of strategy or whatever, then the mid-level will take that and then translate it into what they need at the mid-level to satisfy the top level, and and so on, right? So you start with a strategic plan, and where that goes to is normal cases, an annual business plan. And an annual business plan really is a overall company plan, and that's where you can really apply key strategies to do what you need to do. And normally it's a 12-month plan, and it's based on a 12-month budget, but it's tied into the strategic plan so that it's setting up things in the future as well. It's connected, right? And then from that annual business plan, that's normally where the annual marketing plan falls out of, because now you're really getting into the marketplace and what you need to do. But the marketing plan always has what we call marketing campaigns, right? And in the marketing campaign, it's all about communication. So it's the annual communication plan is aligned with the with the annual marketing plan. and that's key. And the thing is that there's nothing worse than, a company, say if it's got a fair wide scope of product line, and so that there may be different parts of the company doing different parts of the sets of products, and if they're not sending the same message all the time, in their campaigns across the board, well, then what they do is they sow confusion and customers don't understand what's going on. And that's why an annual communication plan ties this all together, right? And then as we get down into into the nitty gritty, a lot of aspects now of an organization is digital marketing, and a digital marketing will even specialize even further to be able to do what they need to do. So you're connecting the strategic plan all the way down through the organization to the marketing plan, all right, and the digital marketing plan. So that's how this all comes together. So again, here's this right out of the slide deck in topic 10, gives you a little more about what the strategic plan is. You can see these components. We talked about those. In the business plan, it's a 12-month budget, describes how the current business functions. Remember, we talked about the business functions and in terms of, say, marketing and operations and finance and treasury and all those things. And then the marketing plan, who are the customers, and that's where the rubber hits the road. Okay, so okay, now we're getting into some highlights. So when you get it down into the marketing planning process, you've got you've got the functional strategies of how they're going to go to the market, and then you'll have a target market, right? And then that translates into the ideal customer, which is the segments inside that target market, and then from the ideal customer going into the buyer persona, which is now a personification of a component of that ideal customer, so that you can really get your head around what makes that customer tick. But with that, there's a pricing strategy, and there's going to be a few questions around the test around pricing strategy, and that's why it's highlighted here. Okay. All right. So just okay, let me just go back to this slide. This guy here, Neil Borden, back in I think it was in the 40s, he actually coined the term a marketing mix. All right. And what the marketing mix was back then, and thrived throughout the 60s, was just four components, and place, which was distribution, the product itself or the offering, right? The price of that, and then how it got promoted. And you would develop different strategies for each one of these components, and that's where it started. But if you look, over the timeline, is that now that we're into digital marketing, I mean, there's this is the 4 P's of marketing. We're into the 8 P's, and I want to draw your attention to place. All right, because place has really kind of advanced. It's really evolved, because place used to be, okay, well, yeah, okay, you can get this product at the corner store, but now place is access, especially on the digital marketing part. How does the customer find what they need to do? How do they buy that, based on either going to, a bricks and mortar operation, or buy it online, or however it gets done. So place has really graduated, and that's a key thing I want you to kind of keep in mind as we're going through that. Okay. So again, in the marketing plan, all kinds of different things to worry about, like product mix is actual components of strategy. Well, it's broken down into tactics, but the pricing strategy is something that's really evolved, right? And you're going to learn about dynamic pricing that Amazon has really a command over, and that's why we're kind of really focusing in on the pricing thing. So look up dynamic pricing, and there's a question in the in assignment 4 about that. Okay, and so what you're doing then, there's here's one piece here. It says a seven crucial steps plan, going to market. Well, you identify that target market, you define that value proposition. That's Alexander Osterweiler's value proposition canvas. You set clear objectives, well, goals and objectives. You develop marketing plan. You build, this is place again. You build sales pipeline in terms of however that is. So it might be digital access. It might be, actual brick and mortar things. It might be key distributions. But then here, you develop the pricing strategy. I mean, that's, after all of what you've done, that's where developing the pricing strategy comes in. And then, you get to market and you measure and optimize. Okay. So again, setting the price for your product and service, it's key, right? So you can see that, this is, one of the pieces that you go into. So now we're just going to step back a little bit and we're going to talk about the ideal client, right? So the ideal client is a list of people who fit your target description, right? And so essentially you could say, yeah, these are my target markets, right? And, again, back to Tim Hortons. Well, one of them is, the working crowd. Another one is the student body, that, goes to the kiosk, on campus and, does their homework, in Tim Hortons next to their, where they're renting and that. And it has the prospects that are associated with that, the list of people who have responded to an offer, or they're key clients already, or they're repeat clients. And then there's champions. And what champions are is they're so excited with your offering that they're actually doing your marketing for you. They're giving, word of mouth. Hey, if you want the best pizza in town, you go to Topper's Pizza in Red Deer kind of thing, right? And they are your advocates. And when we do talk about the customer journey, at the back end of once they bought your product, you want to nurture these champions. So what do? Well, you've got them on a newsletter. You got them on a panel that is giving you advice on how you need to improve your business. Like I'm on a panel for Canadian Tire, on how they can improve. So they send me a note every about once a month and ask me, well, how can we make things better in this area or whatever, those kind of things. All right. So that's what an ideal client looks like. They're your most profitable clients as well, and you'll take a look at, the banks are really discriminatory about this. What they try to do is they try to do as much as they possibly can for their value clients, and the ones that are using, basically the transactional piece of their business, that's where their cost is. Well, they're not really motivating people to stay there. They want to get them up that value chain, right? They want to that value relationship, right? And then so ideal client, they're your most profitable. With the clients that you recommend to others, they've got these common characteristics, so that what's really tying them together as a segment. What motivates them. And then you create a biographical sketch for them, right? And that's when you start getting into the customer persona, all right? And there's different, there's different terms. So ideal customer is sort of the umbrella, and then a buying persona or an avatar or a customer persona, these guys are all the same, all right? Just at different organizations have come about, explaining this. But what you're looking at, the customer persona, demographics, personality, and in personality is psychographics, their preferences, their pain points, their goals, their core values, their communication style, where are you going to find them, and their background. You got to know where their background, you come up with a story about each customer persona. Okay. And the thing is too, is that you can't fully characterize an ideal customer before you truly understand your value proposition, because it's iterative. You create this value proposition with someone in mind, but then you really need to test that and know that are the components of that value proposition, are they resonating with the ideal customer that I want to attract to my business? All right. So that's really key. So know, you could see that this is highlighted here. So know something about that. And so what is it approach? Well, the target market segment. the compelling emotional pains, the tangible, desirable benefits, the gains, the competitive differentiation. How different are you? How unique? That's where the VRIO comes in. How unique are you in terms of your competition? Okay. So again, if you want more about this particular value proposition, you can click this link. You'll get there. Here's what it looks like and again now, you talk about on the target markets. Here's just the 4Ps again, but that place really is what are the channels that you need to go through. The modality is what method are you using to communicate with them. Is it text? Is it a newsletter? Is it advertising on the radio? Right? And then what demographics are there? What are their psychographics? What are their personal interests and something like that. And then if you're doing a work with B2B, like business to business, you want to understand what the business demographics are, of the business customers you're going after. And then, how do you create those relationships and how do you motivate them? So those are all the kind of things that you really need to understand, right? So you need this deep understanding of your target audience and then really meld that with, okay, what is your value proposition? It starts with a thorough understanding of your ideal customer and buyer persona. And then why does it matter? I keep on asking you guys, right? Why does it matter? Well, that's the critical thinking that comes into it, because you're tailoring that value proposition to specific needs and challenges. And then, what source, all right? So, and here's a good source of, you can do a step-by-step guide on the value proposition. And this pen point, I think, gets back to Osterwalder as well. And again, just to kind of reiterate, is that know the difference between an ideal customer and the buyer persona. So the ideal customer, it's a broad definition based on the ideal fit of the target market, but the buyer persona now is a detailed profile based on research and fictional person. And the one video that I watched that really demonstrated is that imagine that this buyer persona is sitting across from you in your office, and you're wanting to make a connection, to sell your offering. What does that person look like? What is that person saying? How are they saying it? How did they get their information? What are they interested in? How are they, how do you motivate them? So that's where you really get down into the nitty gritty of making that connection with the customer. So here's just an example. I pulled this piece off of the internet. And here they call the buyer persona customer avatar, and you can see how this one, this one was Sally the solopreneur. So she's an entrepreneur. So how do you deal with an entrepreneur at age 35 who's been in the business for 1 year or more? They need to learn a lot. Well, that means they need a lot of information. They really need to understand how valuable your product could be to their organization, those kind of things, right? Okay, so I'm going to go through that. So here's some descriptions about those pieces, and then getting back to the value proposition itself, filling that out. And then again, talking about, this item here, the place, in the 8 Ps of marketing, and place used to be in the 4 Ps, it's all about access. So let's think about that. You focus on access, develop an integrated cross-channel presence that considers customers' entire purchase journey instead of emphasizing individual purchase locations and channels. So a lot of times is that they're in a few different places, and so you need some cross-channel tentacles to be able to reach them. And again, we'll get to that customer journey illustration soon, and there it is. Okay, all right. So here it is. So this right here, this really is the phases of a purchase. You get awareness of, oh yeah, I just learned about this product. Yeah, I'll give you a crazy example, right? I learned about this weeder that they started selling at the dollar store for like $5, and it takes out dandelions. All right, I just found out about that, but then I got on YouTube, And man, there was people just raving about this thing. So I thought, oh, I got to buy this, right? So, I considered I'm gonna buy this. So I went online to see if, if they had it on the dollar store website. Couldn't find it. So I started looking, different areas of Red Deer and Calgary, whatever. And guess what? I found some, right? And so what I did, I did make a purchase. But guess what? I bought a couple for my neighbors, all right? So now, I'm a champion, right? Because I'm talking about this. I'm so excited about it. I want my neighbors to know. But, you can take this a little farther than, they want me coming back. So, maybe Dollar Store should have put me on a newsletter, all right? Or found out that I was raving about this on social media, and then connected, and then, put me directly on their blog or their newsletter, because right now, because I'm such an advocate, I'm such a champion, you want to keep them post-purchase, right? So that's what this customer journey is all about, and the various types of interface points, right? So it's all about, touch points. Which ones do you choose for your particular avatar or buyer persona? Okay, so let's get back to, competitive advantage. What products provide a competitive advantage? Well, innovation, focus on the services, the new ideas, all those things. And again, we've taken this before, I think, in topic 9. So understand that competitive advantage curves is that at some point in time, the market catches up with you, and you start losing your sales. And then, here's the point where you decide, hey, do I make an innovation, or do I do I get out of the business? And that's why we talked about the Boston Consulting Group, with the dogs and the stars and the cows and those kind of things. And then what you look at here in terms of where you are in the timeline. Well, you'd want first mover advantage, early in the time. And what that means is you get into an uncontested market, and you get in, you tie up all the sources of raw materials. So then it's harder for somebody else to come in. That's a first mover advantage. Or you tie up the customers so tight, because of the relationship that you have, the intimacy that you have, is that they don't want to switch to another a person that's coming into the market. All right. So these are, a lot of the strategies that are deployed, and a lot of these, like cost leadership, differentiation, these are Michael Porter strategies that we're going to talk about, and this is at and I talked about the cascading. So, you have the corporate side, and then you have, the middle level. That's where the business is, and that's where the cost leadership and differentiation comes in. Okay, so let's get back to the VRIO again, right? So what are these, distinctive capabilities? And what you need to know is that some are tangible. People can see them. They're materialized, but a lot of them are intangible. And you take a look, is that, like Tim Hortons, they wrap themselves up, around the Canadian flag and hockey. And that's an intangible brand, but that's what they're associated with. And that's very powerful in the marketplace to actually give perceived value, right? So those are the kind of things that you should know about. And then understand what can be imitated. What's reproducible? Well, technical capabilities, financial capabilities, marketing capabilities, explicit knowledge. But again, it's how you bring this together in terms of people, process, and technology to be able to make something that can't be it can't be duplicated. It can't be imitable. All right. So those are the pieces. So the key message here is that it's just as hard to sustain competitive advantage, keeping it going, that it is in developing competitive advantage. Because really, you could really say that this is post-development developing competitive advantage rather than saying sustain. You just got to keep alert and keep ahead of the curve. All right, going through. I did talk about blue ocean strategy. I'd recommend that you at least get the summary of this book, and it really talks about why be in a market that's highly competitive and everybody's out there to eat your lunch when you can be in an uncontested market. Nobody's in there yet, and you're innovative and you go in. That's a blue ocean strategy. And then how do you make that competition irrelevant? How do you capture that new demand? How do you lock in the customer from first mover strategy? So have a look at that. There's summaries on the internet that you can get a PDF for free. So I strongly look at that. And how do you build sustainable competitive advantage? Well, you got to know your competition. You got to know your target market. You got to anticipate the future, right? And then there's these 5 components. It's got to be unique, difficult to replicate, superior to the competition, sustainable, which is that's a tough one, and then applicable to multiple situations. So those are the kind of things, for sustainable competitive advantage, which I think is almost it's almost an oxymoron. So you really got to work at it. Okay, so here's where you get into the VRIO and you start looking at your resource-based view. That's what this is all about. Remember, I said that there's 3 types of resources that I want you to take a look at. So the thing is, then you differentiate. Is this? Can you touch this? Can you do it? Can people? Then you're selling a widget. You can handle that widget. You can see how it works. But then again, people will know that, hey, that widget is made by the best steel, and the company that made it, follows, strict quality things. Those are kind of intangible. So you got to, communicate those out there so that perceived value is increased on that thing. All right, and then it must be, what heterogeneous means is differentiable. It's unique, and it must be, you can't. You can't, a competitor can't just pick up that resource that you're using. It has to be immobile. It has to be locked in. So you take a look at new lithium battery, EV, like lithium batteries for electric vehicles. Well, it's no surprise that the major nations went out and bought up all the lithium in the world, kind of thing. They locked it in, right? And so that others can't get that lithium to make batteries as easily. So lithium there is made immobile, right? And then you look at the VRI resources themselves, and then how does that create competitive advantage? So again, intangible assets, internet, like a trademark or a patent. I mean, that's an intangible, and then and going from there. All right, so you want to know a little bit more about that? Go right to topic 10 in Blackboard. Watch, Dr. Power's video on that. She does a great job around, explaining this for you. Okay, so again, just to remind you, all right, there's 3 kinds of firm resources, really, and I want you to use one example for each type of firm resource from Tim Hortons, and then take it and actually do the VRIO analysis and let me know if that's a sustainable competitive advantage or not. Okay? Okay. I'm not going to go through that again. What makes your thing unique. And the thing is too is that when I talked about a mobile, so when I use the lithium example, well, major players locked up the lithium sources. So that's a protected piece, right? So and here's other ways: be first to market with unique products, set up an exclusive service area. I talked about that in my security company. Have a supplier agree to only supply your business. Sole supplier agreement. They're common. Be the only approved vendor. So those are the ways to protect it. And then the ways to unique. Well, to be unique, you go through that process: valuable, rare, costly to imitate, and non-substitutable. So those are the key things. So that's the process that you're going through to be able to say, okay, so if you get through all of this, then you've got some level of sustained competitive advantage. And in some cases, then, people can imitate your product. Well, then you might have a temporary competitive advantage until the market picks up and has the same level of performance as your product or service. Okay. that. So again, I'm going to get you to fill this out in that template, for those three pieces. Okay, so let's talk about product design. And again, here's a yellow arrow, right? And when you look at a product design, defining the product vision comes first. What is it? What's it going to be in a desired end state in terms of what the customer is going to use it for, and how well it's going to perform, and how it's going to change technology or change the world or whatever. And then when you do that vision, it gives you the scope of how to do product research. You're going to need to do some user analysis, some ideation, which is really, okay, let's see what works and what doesn't. And then when you know what really does work, then you put it into design, and then you test it and you validate it. Peterborough is really a test city for Procter and Gamble. So any kind of new product that they come up with in their large use of or their large portfolio of products, they're going through this design, especially on the testing and validation, and then they'll do some launch, to sort of pilot launch, and then post-launch activities, if all things work. But again, let's remember about triple bottom line, right? Sustainable design. And when you're going to produce a product, especially you leaders, as you're going out and you're going to be into the, into the economy for the next 20 or 30 years or 40 years, and that's where it's going to become more and more important that you design sustainability into the product itself. All right, and that's really important, because you're protecting the global and human health environment, and sustainability is profitable. All right. And you take a look at even, where solar power has come in the last 10 years, even it's getting cheaper than oil and gas. All right. And in some cases it is. And if you take a look at the battery capability that it was from now and 3 years ago, and as they're going to solid state batteries, I mean, sustainable designs are, they're going to be, top dog, right? They're going to, so keep that in mind. And really what you're looking at is, this circular economy mindset, of repurposing and recycling and recovering and durable redesign and those things. So that's really important. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit, getting into market research. You can see what's highlighted here. What's the purpose of market research? Well, you're getting insights into customer needs and wants. And then you need to differentiate what's the need versus a want. And a want in some cases might be important, if you're if you're selling a vanity product, like a brand new Lexus, right? People are not just buying it because they have needs, but they're buying it because they want to show their neighbors that they're pretty well off, right? So those are the kind of things you got to consider. Determine the appropriate marketing mix, because each portion or component of that marketing mix is really a tactical piece of the overall strategy of how you're going to market, and understand that external environment, because things can change overnight, and we're in the age of what's the word in terms of destructionable technology. So that that there's always things that are going to displace different types of products and services overnight. So one of the key pieces to understand is that when you're doing market research, there's secondary data, and that's where you can research that. There's different studies out there that you can research on the internet. There's government information that you can access. There's industry information that you can access because they want to promote, their area or their products or whatever. That's secondary data. But then what you need to do sometimes is that you really need primary data, because that's data that you don't have, and maybe it's a lot more explicit or detailed or very intimate to the product or services that you want to that you want to know about. And so you need to do exploratory research. And one of the first parts is doing a focus group. And a focus group really isn't conclusions. It's basically uh, questions with some answers and more questions. All right. But that gives you an idea of how to do better research, qualitative and quantitative, to validate those focus group findings. And then you do that data analysis, and then you can create conclusions and and what you can do for that in terms of recommendations. But here's something that you should know, that exploratory research, it gains background information, it defines terms to clarity problems, hypothesis. Sometimes it asks more questions than what answers it finds, but that's where you can really get started, and then what you do now is that you start getting down into descriptive and causal to really kind of validate what your offering can do in the marketplace, right? So this is key. You can see there's a key right here to know about, all right? And the difference between primary and secondary research, understand that. So here's primary: research, polls, interviews, focus groups, and secondary is online research, literature, research, case studies. And the thing as well too, so what you can know about, sometimes it's expensive to do primary research. And what they have companies that do what they call omnibus research. It means that you can go to them and say, hey, I have 2 questions I want answered, and I'll pay you $10,000 to look at those 2 questions. And they'll take that survey, it'll probably have maybe 10 clients on there, and they'll go worldwide with it. But because it's omnibus, you can get it done for a lot less than if you tried to do it all by yourself. Okay. All right. And then again, there's 2 things to know about with product. There's a loyalty ladder, all right? And you go from an actual prospective customer, say, and then you try to bring them up to be able to be a customer, and then a supporter, and then an advocate, which a champion kind of thing, right? So that's the ladder that you want to bring your customers up, but also understand that there's another thing called customer lifetime value. And the banks are really good at this, all right? So, they'll start offering, credit cards to graduating college students, right? And then, the next level then is, well, yeah, they need to buy a car, right? And then, they're getting older and need to get married. So, we're going to put them into a house. And then, all of a sudden they're amassing value. So they say, oh, you know what? We want to help them invest and create some value as well, right? So knowing that they're bringing you up to be an advocate, and then they're moving the customer up the value ladder as best as they can. So there's 2 ways of really looking at that. Okay, so now we're talking about design thinking, all right? And so that here's where you understand the problem, you empathize, and then you define that problem, and then you brainstorm. That's where you ideate, right? You brainstorm potential solutions, and then you put together a prototype, and then you test it, right? So that's really how you get to the market, and then understanding, these pieces here, and the customer lifetime value. You're bringing them up through to more value, but what you could also understand as well is that as you're bringing people up the customer lifetime value, you're also you're also it shows the importance of customer retention, right? So you have a person that comes into your shop and they buy a $20 hat, right? And they leave, and that's it. You made $20, so maybe you made $3 profit, and that's it. But they come in to buy a hat, and you query them, and you start up a conversation, and you tell them about your organization, and that, hey, that we have online sales, and here's a coupon if you use our online. Next thing you know, that customer maybe came from 200 kilometers away. They're buying online, and then they tell their friends. but they're buying online, and then they find out that you have greater promise. So that $20 hat sale could translate into $20,000 over 10 years of a relationship. That's the power of customer lifetime value. And that's something, that you should be aware of as well. Okay. And again, here's where the Boston Consulting Group comes into the product life cycle, because you can see that, when you start a product, your sales are going to, start getting larger and larger. And even before your sales are up, you've lost, you've invested. So you're making negative profits, and your profit will follow that. All right. And where you are on these sales, like if you're coming down, you might start, promotion prices, to prop up your revenues, and so that, or you need to revitalize your product line. So understand that piece, and that ties in with, this competitive advantage life cycle, because this is where it's going as well, right? And I'll just tell you about the story about DuPont. So this tells you my age, right? DuPont was a premier chemical company in the 70s and the 80s, right? And what they did was they were very innovative. So they would come up with a new chemical compound, and guess what? They charged premium pricing. And then what would happen is, their competitors would come into the market and say, hey, we can make that too. And they started making it. So then what would happen is they'd say, well, you know what? We're going to start charging less for it, because we've paid all our investment out, on developing that project, and we can afford to charge less. And if we charge less, then we'll be a deterrent to other people trying to get into the market, because they're at a different stage, in their company lifestyle, where they need to invest. And if they can't sell as much, well, then they can't invest, right? So that's how, you can play these strategies as you go through. Okay. And when it comes down to, though, in business strategy, milking the cash cow refers to maximizing the profits. This is where you have high a high market share and high sales, and you try to get the most out of that until you can't anymore, and that's why they say you're milking it, right? So that's where it is. So understand this. There's going to be a couple of questions around this in test number 3. So I think this is probably one of the better illustrations to really give you a good idea. You want to invest in these stars because it's high market growth and it's high market shares, and it generates huge cash. There's a little bit uncertainty about it, but because of these conditions, then you're really going to go there. Okay. Yeah, disruptive technology is really what I was talking about earlier, in terms of what's coming into the market today, especially under, how AI is developing products and services, and, that coupled with robotics. So you can see, where, the old typewriter, well, now, you can do everything on your iPhone. So that's where we're there. So we can understand the future if we understand what people are doing when it's hard. Okay. So look for what's difficult and remove the friction, right? So that's what to kind of know. And, here's my typical example of, how the iPod just put the entertainment industry on its ear, because, now with the iPod, you could buy a tune for 99 cents, whereas, back here you had to buy a CD for like 35 bucks. And then where's that gone to? Now it's streaming. So this is, been displaced by Spotify and companies. Okay, so those are the kind of things. And just to tell you what's on the way here, the Internet of Things is basically the sensors that are going into the economy these days. So now what they have is they have intelligent farming. All right. So what are they doing? They're measuring the pH in the soil. They're measuring the wind. They're measuring the temperature, and all of this is going into a data warehouse, and then the data is being analyzed, and it's improving yields and improving efficiencies incredibly. And guess what? The Internet of Things sensors and whatever is doubling. All right, just about every year. All right, so there's this is where the technology is going, and you should know about it. Another thing too is that Robert Cooper was a visiting prof at where I did my master's, and he wrote this book called Winning at New Projects, and came up with this, the gates that you go through to make sure that you're not risking, losing the whole farm, and how to kind of really, get the most out of user analysis, ideation, design, and testing and validation. So those are the key pieces. Okay, this is just highlighted again to know about it. And then now we're going to kind of get into pricing itself. And you can see in the pricing methods, there's all kinds of them. There's cost-based, there's demand-based, there's competition-based, and other pricing methods. But I want you to focus in on what are markup pricing. What is that? And really, it's a strategy of setting the price of a product for sale to its ultimate customers, and it's a percentage of the cost. But it may not work all the time. But the thing is that markup pricing is, and it's mainly in construction, because they don't know where they're going, and they're saying, well, you know what? We don't know what the cost is to build this new technology firm that has special pieces, but what we're going to do then is we're going to assign a markup to what it costs us. So if it cost us, $100, well, we're going to mark it up 10% so we could make, $10 of profit on that $100, right? After we pay everything. Okay, so that's what that markup pricing is all about. So then there's loss leaders, and I think you've seen this before. You'll see that maybe like Shoppers Drug Mart might say that, oh, we've got a sale on batteries where it's 60% off, which means then that they're not making any profit on those batteries that they're selling, but they're getting more people in the store to buy other things. And that's what loss leaders are all about. It's lower than normal price to encourage the purchase of other items. So know quite a bit about that. And then know how this loss leader pricing kind of works. The pricing is to gain market penetration and attain a customer base. And it works best in the way of introducing the customer to the cheapest product or services. Okay, so that's what to know. And then loss leader, well, when you first buy your different things, like for men it's a shaver, women might be a light shaver or whatever. Well, guess what? You normally get the handle for free, right? Because at the end of the day, they want to sell you the blades. All right, so that's that's how that goes. Price skimming, that's when a company charges the highest initial price that customers will pay, and then lowers it over time. So that's one of the things in marketing. They say, well, you can never increase the price of the product once it's introduced, but you can lower it, right? So what you do is, if it's a unique, competitive product, when you bring it into the marketplace, it charges as much as the market will bear. And then as the customers catch up to you, the competitors catch up to you, well, then you start lowering your price to be more competitive. So that's how that works. Okay. And then a little bit about, what's really good about promotion. And, a lot of social media promotion is on these days. And again, associated with artificial intelligence. So I know that, when I, well, like even on Amazon, when I query a product on Amazon, next thing you know, I've got 5 different advertisements on my social media about that product. It's all tied in AI now and very powerful. And there's different ways of promoting, but just understand something about billboards. All right. So key, right? What are the weaknesses of billboards? One of the major disadvantages of billboards advertising is its cost. You're designing, producing, and installing billboards. They can be expensive, especially in prime locations, when you want to rent a sign and high visibility, but there may be reoccurring costs in maintaining and upgrading the billboard content. So yeah, it might be eye-catching, but how much of your prospective market are you catching to be able to advertise to? So that's something to kind of know that what's going on. And we've seen this hourglass of the market funnel, and here's where basically, if you take a look at this and you put it on its side, it really is, that continuum that I showed you on the customer journey. All right. So you can see that, this is, awareness, you can see, and then, interest, knowledge. And then here's, in the other part where you're really kind of, they've made their purchase, but now you want to retain those customers and get them to the point where, they're missionaries for your business. All right. So that's where that piece. And then understanding the ANSA matrix. This is as old as Adam. All right. But it's still really important. And the whole idea is that, it's easier to sell products that you already make in the markets that you sell it to than any other quadrant. And just be aware of that. And so that if you're out diversifying, that means you're creating new products in a possibly in a new market, and that requires a lot more investment and risk. But these are the various combinations of like right here, existing markets and existing products. I mean, here's where you can make the most hay until you saturate, right? So make the most money until you saturate the market, or it's so profitable that your competitors come in and they want to eat part of your lunch, right? So greatest opportunity for growth is selling more products to existing customers. You can see there's a key here going on. And then I think we're getting fairly close to the end of this one. We're going to talk about customer relationship management, CRM. And in today's world, it's amazing, where it's being used. And I'll give you an example. So I go to a dentist one day, and the dental hygienist is asking me, well, where are you from? Well, I'm from here. And you have a family? Yeah. Oh yeah, my daughter's graduating this week or whatever. And I come back, 3 months later, and the dentist is saying, well, how'd your daughter's graduation go? I mean, that is powerful for developing customer intimacy, right? And then, it's more than that. You start keeping track of, where your customer is in terms of their business success, really what they're buying, what they're interested in, all those things. That all goes into CRM, and especially now when it's accelerated or amplified by AI, you can do some amazing things. All right, and again, you can technology can manage digital interactions, with potential customers. You can align the organizational functional strategies. You tie that into customer-centric procedures, and the people. So there's a lot that you can do. But here's the steps to CRM. See, there's a lot of keys here, right? Okay, so understand that you acquire leads, you convert those leads into customers, and then you retain them, because retaining customers gets into this customer lifetime value, right? And the longer that you keep them and the more loyal, the more profit that you're going to make over everything. And the CRM will have you do that, right? So here's another way of looking at it, where you build awareness, you acquire leads. This is really, again, the sales process that it is on the customer journey. But it's all about acquiring, converting, and retaining. And now you've increased to everything. And there's operational CRMs, there's analytical CRMs, there's collaborative, there's all kinds of CRMs out there. And the thing is that 5 artificial intelligence is transforming CRM 5 ways. All right, so it's key in making this work as well. Okay, is that it? I think that's it. Okay, so that's topic 10. And what we're going to do now then is I'm going to take a about an 8-minute break, so that I'm going to shut the camera off, and I'm going to shut the mic off. So you're going to see a little bit, I think, of blank film going on, and then we're going to get into topic 11. So if you have any questions, all you faithful audience people out there, just put them on the chat, and I'd be happy to answer them. Okay, so I'll just shut down a little bit. I'm not going to shut the tape down, but shut down, and I'll be back at 2:30. Okay, I'm back. All right, so topic 11, let's look at the deliverables. No surveys to complete in topic 11. Again, just a little bit of reminder here on this slide deck about test 3. I went through that already. But here we are in terms of this continuum of theories and management principles. And we're down and near the end here now, where we're going to talk about quantitative and contingency, with Blanchard and those people, the quantitative, the TQM, you know, who's the other guy, Edward Demings, in terms of the quality movement, and then a lot about systems. And I think if you're going to really kind of embrace artificial intelligence, you better start learning more about systems thinking. That's key because everything's interrelated, right? And you got to understand patterns, and you got to understand how these things come together, and that's how AI works. They really AI looks at patterns and then makes sense out of patterns. And if you understand the thinking behind it, then you'll be able to direct AI in better ways. Okay, so when I graduated from my master's, the associate dean taught business policy, and we're on the last day of school, right? And he said, hey, you guys have any questions? And we said, well, we're leaving this program. What's the most important thing that we should know about when we leave? And so he went into this thing about, hey, we showed you all these tools, and a lot of the tools in the master's programs were around, balanced scorecard and around competitive advantage. And he said, you can be smart on all this, but if you really have to know the business to be able to use these tools. And I think that's where operations management comes in, is that, verse yourself along the lines of operations management, because it really brings efficiency and effectiveness into play, right? And that's really what you're trying to do, in terms of management principles, is you're in search of competitive advantage. You're making things more effective and efficient. So really getting a good breakdown of operations management. I think a lot of the things that I learned as a process engineer when I was in the nuclear program at Ontario Hydro, I applied when I got into business process reengineering, because I was already there. I knew about inputs and outputs and how to measure and all those things, and that really helped me kind of do what I needed to do. So operations management really gave me a leg up on business. So I'm trying to bring that your way so you can understand that. And the thing is that here's the most important parts in that particular presentation, that so that you need to define the nature and purpose of the value chain of management. And again, Michael Porter really is he was the author of the value chain, and so that that translates into what's going on now in terms of just the supply chain management. I mean, it's all about the value chain. It's just an amplification of the value chain in supply chain management. And we're going to show, that chapter really gets into describing how value chain management is done. So this is a really important piece. And then, I already gave a segue to the supply chain, but it's how this, if you understand the supply chain and how this all works, then choosing the suppliers is so important in today's world, because we're all part of a supply chain now. It used to be that business had its own distribution, its own raw materials and all that. That's gone today. And what happens is, okay, let's just take Amazon for instance. Your order gets late, right? But you know what? It's the courier that screwed up on your order being late. But what do you think? You say, I'm not dealing with Amazon anymore. So picking the right business partners is so integral to keeping your brand strength. And because you have to really behave like an overall virtual company. And back 30 years ago, it was companies competing against companies. In today's world, it's value chains competing against value chains. And when you start understanding that, then you understand okay, this is really important, and how we assess the capabilities of our value chain really assesses the capabilities of our our overall enterprise. All right, so that's what's key. Okay, so look at IBM. They're really getting into this piece. They're using predictive AI for better profitability. They're aligning logistics and inventory planning using AI, AI and advanced analytics for demand planning and forecasting. So it's all coming together. And so that if you think that you'll be able to sidestep AI in the next career that you go into, that's not going to happen, right? So you got to really get into that. And so here we are. There's 4 participation activity deliverables in topic 11, right? 11A, B, C, and D. All right. They're all due on June the 14th, just so you know. Okay. And again, this first one, it'll help you, on assignment number 5 is your team review, and look at, your communication style in your Pearson Revel survey, and talk about, the actual working style attributes that you can compare to your survey results. And then again, why does it matter, right? Why do you think this attribute affects your communication style? And again, please answer this in a table form, right? It's so much easier for me to help you, if you help me, okay? The next one is another individual exercise. When you look at your actual working communication, supportively style, and talk about the actual working communication support attributes that you can compare to in your survey results, and then why do you think this is important? And here's the link right now. You won't be able to do that from here, but if you go to topic 11, you can click on that link and find out what you're going to have to do. So this is really getting you ready for your assignment number 5. Okay. Another thing, where we're going to, and one of the tools is SciPoc, all right? And this video is, I can't remember how long it is. It's only 9 minutes long, but it will really kind of give you an idea of, what SciPoc is all about. And it's about, finding the right supplier and managing that supplier the way you should. And I strongly recommend that you do that. And again, you can see that this is all part of the value chain, and that's why we brought in SciPoc on this piece. So on the next assignment, and I can't say this enough times here, right? So Tim Horton relies on a network of suppliers to provide essential ingredients and products. They got all kinds of suppliers. What I want you to do is pick one, all right? It could either be the coffee bean supplier or dairy products or baked goods or paper products, but you just pick one of these suppliers to do activities 11C and 11D, all right? That's crucial. Just one. And that way, you'll keep it down to simplicity and do this, don't give me a whole list of these. And there may be others. Like this is just an example of listing, but just pick one. So what you're going to do then is you're going to look at a supplier. So it might be coffee bean company A, and then what do they input? Well, that's coffee beans. What process do they do? Well, they actually they go right from the plantation, to the bean roasting, to the grinding, and then they actually distribute it to to the actual Tim Horton locations. And what's their output? Well, it's ground coffee beans, and the thing is that you're the customer. Okay, so that's how that really kind of gets together. The next one is, okay, so let's say you pick that ABC coffee company. Well, then I want you to use this model to evaluate. So you're trying to pick a coffee bean supplier, partnering with the right supplier, so to make sure that you've got the quality and the cost efficiency and the reliability. And not only that, the long-term capability. You might pick a winner that's just fantastic as a supplier and a supply chain, but they're at the end of their capacity. And if you're a growing company, 1 year from now, they may not be able to keep up with you. So those are the kind of things that you really need to consider. But then you look at, their capacity, their long-term capacity, their commitment to quality, consistency. And oh, by the way, again, use these numbers, list them 1 to 10, and do what you need to do for this deliverable. Okay. And again, operations management transformation process. So what does operations do? It transforms and adds value, right? Provides outputs for customers or clients. Where the inputs are raw materials, where the inputs where the inputs are information or people. The nature of the transformation may be less obvious. So, for example, hospital transforms ill patients, the input, into healthy patients. So just keep that in mind when you're doing that, because we're kind of rekindling this thing that you saw in the early topics. All right, and again, I'm focusing in here on the exchange, the retail, available for the customer. That's the transformation. So somebody buys a widget in a hardware store, at one hardware store, and then they sell it to a customer. Okay, well, that's an exchange transformation. Okay, so here's another highlight. So what are the the value creating activities of retailers? Well, they provide the product, they establish the pricing, they provide wider range of product offerings, like complementary products or those kind of things, and then improvements, on innovating products. So that's what they do. And again, the exchange, that's the retail. They sell something to a customer. The input of a customer with cash or credit, and the input of a retailer with a good or service. All right. So that's where that is. So why do we need to know about the value chain in topic 11? All right, because you got to prepare for activity 11C, but also the SIPOC is one of the questions in the assignment number 4, right? And then this is why, what do you get out of SIPOC? Well, how do you make the value chain leaner? How do you make the supply chain leaner? Right? How can we make this process easier? How do you deliver a better quality product to customers? How can you improve the way you manage suppliers? Are your suppliers doing the right things? Delivering what you need? Do we know the personas of our customers and what demographics they fall into? Are there any inefficiencies? Well, all this, comes out of a SIPOC analysis. So it can't be trivial, all right? And then here's one of my heroes, okay? So Michael Porter, and he coined this term, value chain, and here's where operations comes into, and understand that operations is a primary activity, and you can see all these things up here are primary activities, but all these things right here are typical support activities. So you'll have maybe a company that has 5 manufacturing locations, all right, in operations, but they'll only have one human resource management body that handles all those 5 locations. That's why they're a support activity, and that's why the actual the buildings producing things are operations. Okay, a little bit of Porter, just to know that he did create these 5 forces, and he is the author of these 4 generic strategies that are used over and over and over again in business. And he coined the term value chain. All right. So here's more information. I'm not going to get into it, but you can see that it's highlighted. I would encourage you to read this. How an organizational creates value, and the more value an organization creates, the more profitable it's likely to be. And when you provide more value to your customers, you build competitive advantage. So again, it all comes back to competitive advantage, and this is Michael Porter's mantra is competitive advantage. How do you keep it? How do you build it, and how do you keep it? All right. And again, Porter's value chain focuses on systems and how inputs are changed into outputs purchased by customers. Okay, so here's another look at the value chain, a little more illustrative, and you can see that these guys here are support activities, and these are primary activities. So this is flipped over from the first one. The other illustration had this on top and that in the bottom, but just to know, you can see that the support activities go all along the way of the value chain in the support, whereas in the primary activities, it's a component of the chain, okay? And really what you're creating, competitive advantage. Okay. How does that value chain analyst impact strategic planning? Well, you could do a lot of robust strategic planning and look at productivity, cost savings, differentiation, and customer satisfaction, because this is the entire model, right? It's all about the business model, to really get a good sense of how to analyze things. All right. And the activities of the value chain, they're building blocks of competitive advantage. Don't forget that. Okay, so that's where that is. Here's the steps, on how you do that. You look at the sub-activities, those kind of things, identify them, blah, blah, blah. All right, so, okay. So competitive advantage always comes back to developing competitive strategy. And that's where this guy really comes in. And what he created was, these, what he calls, what's the word of them now? They're, yeah, I can't remember the typical ones. That'll come to me. But generic strategies. So that's what they're known as Porter's generic strategies. So these two are totally recognizable. Cost leadership, low cost. Well, you could put Walmart in this category. All right. Differentiation and leadership. Well, you could put your Lexus dealership, in this thing. They're offering a premium product, with all kinds of bells and whistles. Okay. And then inside of that, there's a narrow band where you can do a cost focus, but it's a very narrow market segment, very specialized. Or you can use that like find another narrow market segment where you can be unique. It's a niche going through. But there's a problem with this, all right? And the key problem is that sometimes these very narrow segments, their preferences change really quick, and all of a sudden you're irrelevant. Or it's a dying segment. People are moving on because of economic collapse or whatever, and they can't sustain their buying power anymore. So those are the kind of things you got to worry about. They do exist, and there are players in that market that do really, really well, but you got to understand the risks that are involved, right? Okay, so here's where you make the distinction. This is a really important slide, all right? You can see the big golden key here, is that you make the distinction between differentiation and cross strategies when you look at the competitive advantage. So when you're deciding how to improve your value chain, you got to know whether your value chain is about cost advantage or your value chain is geared towards differentiation, because you've got to be congruent with with your value chain objectives or outcomes. All right, so depending on your strategy, your value chain will change. Okay, so just understand that. So if you're going to be a cost advantage, well then you better make sure that your value chain is compatible with that. If you're going to do a differentiation advantage, you better make sure that your value chain is congruent with that. So here's the so the puts and takes around cost advantage and differentiation advantage. Well, the approach for cost advantage, organizations try to compete on cost. So you can see them: Amazon, Walmart, McDonald's, Toyota. But here, the differentiation advantage, they strive to create superior products or services, and they use that differentiation approach. So Apple, right? They want to be the best in innovation around the products, and not only that, they limit the amount of products that they're on the market with only because of that, because they want to be super good at what they're doing. Okay, and you could see Starbucks is there and that. So here's some steps to be able to do that. So again, here's how, when you're setting up the value chain or the supply chain as well, identify the firm's primary and support activities, establish the relative importance. So what you're doing then is you're building in that cost advantage strategy in every one of these steps, right? You're building in the differentiation advantage in every one of these steps. So that's what you need to consider. So it's a strategic management tool. There's no doubt about it. It's very useful. All right, so now we're switching gears and we're going to talk about knowledge intensive firms. Okay. And they're service-based organizations that solve complex problems, provide solutions for clients. So they've got this human capital and expertise that few organizations have. So you can see like a pharmaceutical or a health biotech. They're really specialized. They're high in knowledge and really high in innovation. So that's really what you need to know about, in this area. But the thing is that the key characteristics of knowledge intensive firms, well, yeah, knowledge, skills, and experience, that's a core competency that gives them competitive advantage. Knowledge is difficult to imitate and embed. So you'll see that they won't, so they may have a database. They will not give you access to that database, but what they'll do is they'll do the analysis for you and give you the implications of the analysis, right? But they won't share that with you because once you have their database, then you don't need them, right? And then you can see that both knowledge stocks and flows are important. Okay, so what's a knowledge stock? Well, a knowledge stock is very strategic data that gives you maybe a status on things. So a company might collect, cost studies on producing, producing hydrogen. All right, and they will have all the information needed, around that knowledge for producing hydrogen. Whereas flows, it's more around that how they use that information to produce an output for you. All right, so that's key. So let me see here. So you can see here, that databases, that's stock. Content management system, that's stock. That gives you tools. But mining, extracting, storing, organizing, sharing, those are flows, and that's really what gets you there. Okay, so their value chain is a little bit different now. All right. Okay, so you can see, here's their support activities: the knowledge system, knowledge culture, organizational memory. But then, here's their actual primary activities: knowledge identification, knowledge acquisition. And what are they doing? They're driving performance and outcome, which really turns into competitive advantage. Okay, so that's that piece. Total quality management, can't say enough about that. You should really learn about what Kaizen is. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. But total quality management is all about continuous improvement, right? Kaizen. And you take a look at, the Honda automobile plant in Ontario. They have, quality circles. These are team members at the end of the shift, just near the end. They talk about, okay, what went wrong, what went right, how can we improve things? Because every day, after every shift, they're seeing how they can improve things. And that's really the crux of total management, total quality management. That's really what Deming brought into, the principles around total quality management. Okay, and how's it done? Well, through the teams, employee empowerment, and it's focusing on customer satisfaction, right? So those are the pillars, going through. And here's the guy, the father of quality management, Edward Deming. A little bit of interest around him. So he was very prominent during World War II, and in terms of, productivity around the war machine, and really was looked at, as well. He was one of the 6 foundational quality pioneers, right? So he had a lot to do with improving, the war machine in the U.S. The war went over, and they decided, well, they don't really need him anymore. Right? So he went over to Japan, and they loved him, and that's why the automobile industry in Japan got to be, the envy of the world because of Edward Deming, and they gave him, the I think the honor of Japan, or the honor award or whatever, to the point where the Americans were so ticked they thought he was a traitor. But I mean, they didn't pay attention to him. He went somewhere else. So, but he came up with 14 points, and the thing is that one of the key mantras of his is that if you focus on costs, costs go up and quality goes down. That's unlikely outcomes of that. But if you focus on quality, quality goes up and costs will fall. Right. And that's true. And what they do is when you're focusing on quality, you're lowering the level in the pond, and you start exposing the problems, the big boulders. And because you're measuring all the right things, and you're seeing what's going on, and you understand, and you develop a range of operating, that is just within the range of variability. And as soon as you get out of variability, you can detect what's not right. So that's really where this concept came, is that you drop the water level, then you have to you'll be able to see those boulders, and then you'll be able to fix them because you're working on quality, and then your costs will come down because everything will go better. Okay, so know what these, read them, I guess. I'm not gonna ask you a specific question around what's one of the 14 points, but this is a really good 14 points to know about, right? Adopting the philosophy, and the thing is, it's not mass inspection anymore, and that's where we were before the quality movement came. They would just inspect and then just pull out all the defects and throw them away or waste them. And now what the philosophy is, you build quality into the process so you don't have defects, right? And there's a thing called Six Sigma, it's zero defects. So it's, I think, one defect in a million hits, right? And then look at modern methods of training on the job, and looking at removing barriers for quality and those kind of things. So go through that piece. And really what he came up with was this, act, plan, do, and study, the Deming style. And then the quality movement took it over, and it's check, act, plan, do, all right? Or do, check, plan, act, or do, check, act, plan. And that's a key mantra for quality circles right now, to do something. And it really, you recognize a problem, you do formalize the improvements, you define the problem, you develop the performance measures, determine the causes, implement the solutions, evaluate, and you keep going around this. And that's, the circle of continuous improvement. Then there's just-in-time lean manufacturing. So know what these 8 wastes are, okay? Overproduction, there's 8 of them. Know what they are. That's a memory thing, and this will help you a little bit more in finding that. Tim Woods has a nice depiction on what are the 8 forms of waste. Here's this thing about finding the boulders, right? So I couldn't remember I had a slide like this. So what happens is, when the water level's high, it's meaning, you've got extra inventory to make up for a bad machine or whatever. When you start lowering the water, you don't use that extra inventory to make up for the bad machine. You start seeing the problems that the bad machine has, and you fix that. So once these are all exposed and you fix them, well, then you can drop the water level. All right, have less inventory. And yes, inventory can make up 35 to 65% of your output costs, believe it or not, right? When it comes down to unneeded inventory, and all the care that goes into it, the security and the storage and all that stuff. So this is, lean manufacturing is the way to go. So here's where you're going to use your SIPOC diagram. So you're going to look at a supplier for Tim Hortons. What are the inputs? What's the process? How do they do what they do to get to Tim Hortons? What are the actual outputs based on that process? Who's the customer inside of, there's internal customers inside of Tim Hortons. Is it the cook? Is it, is it the manager? Okay, and what are the requirements? So, that's really how to look at that. And if you take a look at, comparing the SIPOC to a business model, I did that right up front in that other presentation, so you can see where this all comes together. So, so here's the thing, you're answering these questions. How do we make the value chain leaner? How to make the process easier? How do we deliver quality product? And those are all the things that you need to know. So you're going to create this SIPOC team with your diagram with your team, and again, it's all based in choosing a supplier and maintaining, managing that supplier. And then where are we here? Choosing a supplier is really important, and there's ways of doing that, and it's putting in the right questions in a competitive bid. And number of suppliers comes into play too. So, if you've got an item that, well, I'll give you an example. All right. So when I was a process engineer, I used to have these diaphragm valves because I was looking after a water purification system. These diaphragm valves they failed all the time. All right. And it was hard to keep inventory. But I kept two suppliers because if I couldn't get that particular diaphragm valve from one supplier, I got it from the next. But the trade-off to that is that all of a sudden now you've got two sets of administration for two sets of suppliers for the same basic product. So you got to do the logistics on that, or the math, or the math on that to make sure that works. Okay. And then here's all those things that you need to kind of consider when you're choosing a supplier. All right. So are they good at that? That how well does the chain respond to unplanned events? What are their performance metrics? So all that has to go into the selection piece. I can't remember why I put this slide in, but I'll just talk about it. Right? It's mainly this came to me doing for operations management when I was doing all the training in that area. And what it is that when you get into a supply chain, you have all these players that rely on forecasting. So what they do then is that they make this forecasting collaborative right across the entire supply chain. Everybody has a part in that because there's things that you'll learn about called whiplash, and that that if there's one loss in the chain, then the supply starts fluctuating, and so that collaborative planning and forecasting is a key area that you'd really want to understand, if you're going to be managing in a corporation or an organization that uses, a strategic supply chain. So that's what that's all about. Keiretsu long-term alliance. And the thing is that this is mainly, a Japanese thing. I actually did a little bit of research in the last week, and I wanted to know if maybe Mark Carney kind of got into this. And he didn't. His strategy doesn't really look at Keiretsu, but because I thought maybe I'd try to make a Canadian connection to that, and I couldn't. But the key thing is that there's a high level of interdependence. I talk about this in strategic planning. This interdependence piece, that's the crux, all right, of making things work. Especially in a supply chain, and then there's a Toyota production system, and that's, it's deployed like all over the world because it was so successful for Toyota. Okay, and then just a little bit about when do you buy something or do you make something for your operation? When you buy something, that's outsourcing. When you make it, it's insourcing. So you'll notice sometimes, when you call TELUS and for a problem that you have with your telephone line or your IT or something, you call that, and what do you get? You get someone at the end of the line in the Philippines. All right, that's outsourcing. So they've outsourced that whole customer service process of customer fulfillment, right, to a company. And there's two ways of looking at that. You got to look at the advantages and disadvantages of outsourcing versus insourcing, right? And you can see now there's certain companies, especially with AI and AI voices and whatever, certain banks They'll only have people that answer the phone, and there'll be people that are in the branches, right? That's insourcing. They're paying for that, but they're paying a high price for that. So you got to weigh that, one against the other. So you're insourcing using an organization's own personnel or other resources to accomplish a task that was previously outsourced. And this is a key issue with organizations, all right? Just so you know that. So that insourcing versus outsourcing, sometimes you'll hear it as make or buy analysis, right? So they'll say, okay, if we're going to make this, okay, well, we need production, we need extra labor, we need monitoring, we need storage, we need waste disposal. But if we're going to buy it, well, then we just have to worry about the purchase price, sales tax, shipping, storage, and ordering. All right. But when you buy something, you don't have the control. All right. And sometimes you need that control. Okay. So, those are the things that you need to consider. All right. And the thing is, well, I'll just get back to this. We'll probably have a slide on here somewhere, but you never outsource your core competency. That's something, your core competency is a component of giving you competitive advantage. And if you look at, say, Apple, all right? Apple, their core competency is the design of their products and the marketing. They'll never leave that to anybody else. But they have a company called, I think it's Foxconn or something like that, that does all their manufacturing and their logistics, getting their products to market. Okay. And so if Foxconn then was in their design, well, then they'd be training Foxconn to compete directly with them. So you never outsource your core competencies because you're really training your supplier then to beat you and eat your lunch. All right. So that's what you got to worry about, in the main pieces. Okay. So, but, when you do outsource, there's security issues, there's loss of control, there's unplanned costs, there's loss of ownership, there's, you lose the business knowledge associated with that, and so that, you got to be really thinking about that. So when it comes to understanding Keiretsu, these are long-term relationships. Well, profits go up, costs go down because they know how to create synergy amongst the partners. They're all in it, in the same game, and looking at what they can improve for the overall outcome of the virtual organization. All right. So here's a typical one. So it's a Japanese term for business network, and you can see, right from the banks to different partners to the overall supply chain, they're all in it together. Right. China does this too, but where China is different is they pick all the winners, right, to work in there. Whereas I think Japan will let the market handle that by themselves. Another version of it. But then, it comes down to whether it's the supply chain or Keiretsu, you want to evaluate every supplier that comes in there, right? And what you do then is that you weight the criteria. So you can see here that engineering, research, and innovation in this particular supplier evaluation is 20% of the weight, right? This all adds up to 100%, okay? Integrity is 20% of the weight, whereas distribution delivery capability, that's not as important, so it's only 5% of the weight. Okay, so you evaluate the criteria, and this is what they call what do they call that now? Can't remember the term, but anyways, so what you do is you multiply the weight times the rating, and then you get a score, and then you can get an overall score. So you would have this criteria for maybe 5 similar suppliers, and the one with the highest score would be the one that you choose. All right. Okay. So that's how you work that piece. All right. So now I'm just going to talk about business integration strategies, and what you have is vertical integration. All right. So what that means is it's all the way down. So let's just talk about Tim Hortons. All right. So Tim Hortons creates a final product, all right, and then they sell it. So that's forward integration. So if Tim Hortons then put a kiosk inside of RDP, that would be forward integration because it's beyond their their owned retail pieces. Now, but let's say, hey, you know what? Coffee is getting to be a strategic priority. There's been climate disruptions, so that there's a disruption in the actual the production of coffee. So they can say, all right, so what we're going to do then is we're going to buy a coffee plantation, and we're actually going to buy the suppliers, the collection of the coffee and the grinding and whatever, and that's called backward integration. Okay, so going out this way, they're finding other areas to do business in the same area, and now this way here, they're buying up the back end of their supply chain, right? So that's what vertical integration is. All right. So what then is there's horizontal integration. So what horizontal integration is, you know, uh, Tim Hortons will decide that, hey, they're going to buy Starbucks, they're going to buy Coffee Time, they're going to buy Second Cup. That's horizontal integration. So really, they're, by either buying it or merging with them, that they're really expanding their market footprint, throughout a country or whatever. All right. So that's horizontal integration. But there's different kinds of horizontal integration. One is that they can actually maybe create a new coffee brand, and it might be, Tim, it might be Jack Hortons, okay? Or, they can buy a competitor, or they can, they can buy, other competitors. Okay, so, and that's consistent, but what they could also do is that, hey, we're really in the hospitality business, so maybe we should be buying hamburger joints too. And that's a different set of horizontal integration. But that's the key pieces. So understand that as business integration strategies. And what you need to know about supply chain management, there's all the logistics, from suppliers to retail. That's the logistics of supply chain management. And then overall supply chain management is the planning and improving of all this, and then the data analysis for performance improvement, going forward. Okay. Here's another thing that you should know is that, say 20 years ago, it was all about forward logistics. Is that, somebody decided that, hey, we can send products to Africa, and what it is that, we're gonna sell clothing, right? And that's all forward. Okay. But then think of it this way. Let's say Ford Motor Company, right? Yeah, we're gonna send our half-ton trucks to to Africa. We're going to sell them there. But now what happens is when a half-ton truck gets there and there's a fault in the actual manufacturing, what do you do? Well, what, you send people over to Africa to fix it? That's pretty expensive, right? Or um, you've sold that truck, and 5 years later, they need to change a transmission, because of wear and tear. Well, you send people over with the transmission? No. So now they created what they call, reverse logistics. So in that supply chain, there's a way of, in some cases, this is not a very good example, but bringing that truck all the way back to Detroit and having it fixed there, um, or you know, uh, having a maintenance operation, in one port of Africa where they can send them to and everything gets fixed. So that's backwards. Okay, that's backwards logistics or reverse logistics. And understand that this now really is the main problem to solve when you're competing, when you're having competition amongst supply chain versus supply chain, because now a supply chain that has reverse logistics as well as forward logistics is a lot more of value to a customer because they know they're going to be taken care of for the lifetime of, of that product. All right. So that's key. All right. So again, here's some examples, about something comes back for fix or refurbish, and then, they'll either, take there are different steps on where that particular goes, all right, to a discount channel, or they may take it back to the customer. So there's a lot of different types of that, but all you really have to understand is, reverse logistics equal backward logistics. Yeah, they're not going to talk about that. You notice there's no highlighting here. Okay, now we're going to talk about, enterprise requirement planning. All right, and what that is that software that integrates everything: the finance, human resources, logistics, manufacturing, supply chain management. There's a software that kind of puts this all together, and everybody could see real time what's going on amongst all the interdependencies. And you can generate reports so you could see where the issues are and what you need to do. So that's what the key. And then there's different components around that, like RFIDs. And what an RFID is, it's a radio use device. So Amazon's ERP can track, a parcel from when it gets put over to the supplier to, what port it's at and when it's going to be delivered to the home. That's all done through scanning of radio frequency identification devices. And the key to this is that RFIDs amazingly are getting cheaper and cheaper and are able to carry more and more information. So you could have like an interactive RFID. I can't remember what the term is, but you could put that on a refrigeration unit and it'll be on a ship somewhere. And if the refrigeration goes down, it sends a signal to the ERP to say, hey, there's a problem here, let's fix this somehow. All right, so that's what that's all about. So enterprise resource planning, ERP systems, what is it? It integrates all functions across the company to a single computer system, and that's what it does. But here's some top tier. You don't have to know this, but top tier ERP providers: SAP, market leading, Oracle ERP Cloud, Microsoft Dynamics 365. So I was involved at TELUS when they brought in the integration of SAP, right? And that was in the earlier 2000s. And I'll tell you, this was like a 5-year project, and it was intense because it has to connect to every interface of every software point of systems to be able to, bring it all together. And the integration of the interfaces is the crux. And it could be like, it was millions of dollars, over many years and many hardships, right? So it's not some easy thing to do, So, but it can also integrate their suppliers, and they've done that. I mean, like inside of inside of the mobile piece, they integrate right to their cell phone suppliers, those kind of things, and it gives you databases, and you can do custom design reports. So, and it does best practices. But then, consider, where it is now and where it will be with AI developments. Doing all the intelligence around making reports more meaningful and more, on time. Like it's amazing. Okay, so it integrates financial information, customer order information, standardized speed up operation processes, reduces inventory, standardized HR information. So again, right across the value chain, right? Okay, major reasons for adopting it. Benefits, real-time system, increased productivity, reduced operating costs, improved internal communications, foundation for future improvements. Big time in customer service advantages, improved communication, competitive advantage, increased sales and products. So a lot that goes there. But here's what you need to know. All right. So again, this is this change curve. And remember, I talked about the valley of despair. So if you're a part of a major ERP change, you know that you're going downhill for a while. And the whole idea is to know that this is happening. And so what you're doing is you celebrate all the wins that you possibly can, as you're moving along that piece, and you get ready, you get people ready for it and let them know that things are not going to be so good until they start really getting better. And then by the time, you get acceptance, then you're in the clear. And the thing is, this was years ago now with FAP. And I mean, now it's just the way they do business. And they couldn't be as competitive as they are today if they wouldn't have implemented that change. Okay. And this is just to give you a sense of, the cost. So look at 53 companies. I don't know, this is probably 3-year-old data. 53 companies out of 63 reported over $5 million with a median annual saving of 1.6 million. 9 companies accounts for 73.4% of reported savings. So, I mean, there's a lot in there, but I'll tell you, it takes 12 to 18 months. It could be millions of dollars, and then I think this went on for at least 4 years to tell us. And look at some of the costs, up to $35 million a year, system over a 7-year period. I mean, there's kind of big things. But just so you know, if you're looking for employment and you want to be an SAP specialist, you can make lots of coin, right? Because you can get certified as an SAP provider specialist on planning, coding, everything else. And just look at the salaries here that are going on. All right, and that's it for this piece. So again, that's it for topic 10 and 11. Both are along, so the test number 3 is going to be 9, 10, 11, and 12. And if you have any questions, please email me. And like I said, if I feel that your question can help the rest of your cohorts, I will anonymously publish that question along with the solution to help everybody. It'll be on announcements on Blackboard. Okay, and we'll go from there. Okay, and for all you audience, thank you so much for showing up. It's always nicer to have people here, and when I'm going through this, it makes me think a little differently. So I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to shut off the recording and then sign out.